Hello, and welcome to Staying Awake.
I have a sleeping disorder. I can't tell the difference between my waking life and dreams.
Hello, and welcome to Staying Awake.
Oscar Isaac, I have been waiting a long time to interview you, my friend, and I have 3 words for you. The skirt's working. I love it.
I agree.
Such a good look. I've always admired watching you on screen because I know that you love taking roles and experiences that are just so outside of your own. And I was reading that you said in an interview that Moon Knight is the first legitimate character study in Marvel since Iron Man. So I was wondering, why is that? And what about this character sort of granted you that experience?
Well, thank you for that. I guess what I mean by that is that it really, the whole story is from the point of view of the character. And it's introducing a whole new character and how he feels and what he's going through. And the entire series is a outward expression of his internal struggle with mental health in particular, and his revelation and then healing from abuse and trauma. So all of those aspects done inside of a Marvel superhero show just seemed like such a unique and crazy experience.
Your range is like, it's unbelievable. Like I hope you were just so proud of yourself. And it's really fun as a fan for all of us to watch you close that gap, of things that feel so outside of yourself.
I mean, well, that's the idea. I mean, that's like really, really well put, because I think that is, for me, what the fun of acting is. It's like any skill, you the better you get at it, the more you want to challenge yourself and do something that's harder. And the magic for me is like finding a character that feels like it has nothing to do with your personal experience. And, the magic is like, how do you find that truth and do it? And like, that's what makes, I think, with the magic is like, you don't feel alone. Like, it's like people feel seen, because it's like, how did you know,
Right,
and that's an amazing thing. Yeah.
And that there's so much inside of us that we didn't even know, which speaking to that point, one of your,
every woman, it's all in me.
Yeah. To that point, Oscar, I was reading that you specifically wanted to give Steve a British accent to sort of, to be able to differentiate a little bit easier. I wanted to ask you, why British? And what voice did you draw upon for that? Did you listen to tapes? Like, who are you sort of emulating?
It actually wasn't to differentiate, because it was just like, who is Steven? It was set, when I got that first episode, it was set in London, but he was written as American. So I said, why is this set in London? And they just said, well, we have too many heroes in New York. We have too many New York stories. We just wanted to change it up. So we just made him an expat. And I was like, all right, but seemed like there was an opportunity to do something different for me, like that was part of it. So what would keep me interested is like, well, what if we made him English? What if we made him a Londoner? And then I looked at like, because I still wanted, it's very important, he's still Jewish but he's English. And, I listened to Russell Kane, who's a comedian, that, his biography kind of fits that. And, comes from like a suburb out of London called Enfield. So there was that. I listened to people from there. I thought about Carl Pilkington. I don't know if you know who that is. He's like an idiot abroad. He's like part of Ricky Gervais's.
Oh, that show's so good.
Yeah,
it's
so
the best
him,
show
right?
ever.
Yeah. So he's more north, but it was more about his his sense of humor, where you can't tell if he knows he's being funny, So it was like I drew a little bit from that, a little bit from Russell Brand, and just kind of found this character.
God, it's so good. And it's so funny too. Like, I love that British humor.
Yeah,
It's
me too.
so good. And it's funny that you said Londoner. They just wanted to like make him from London. We got to get a Dominican or Guatemalan Avenger in here at some point.
Well, I don't want to spoil anything, but watch the whole series. You see there might be some surprises in there.
Okay.
Also, the other thing is we've got a lot of English guys coming over to be like doing New York accents. I felt like it was time to repay the favor a little bit.
Totally. And another way that Moon Knight's different too is the brutality, Oscar. Like, I feel like when Avengers fight bad guys, it's not as violent. So I wanted to ask you about the physicality of this character. And did you channel energy from any of your other characters? Because William Tell in The Card Counter kind of comes to mind when you're watching it.
Right. No, there are, it's funny. There are some similarities there because he's also a military guy and someone that's clearly dealing with a lot of rage issues. But no, that definitely was a cue from the comic. I mean, that's part of him. He's incredibly brutal. And for me, again, it was tying that to the emotional trauma that happened, which is, and what Khonshu represents, which is that's his vengeance and his rage against the people that did him wrong, and that comes out as punishment to others. And so it was important that there is a brutality to his physicality.
It must be very difficult. The voice in your head. Shut up! There's chaos in you.
Ethan, thank you so much for doing this. It means so much to me. I've always wanted to interview you. Congratulations on Moon Knight. I know you've probably been asked this a bunch today, but I read that you met Oscar Isaac in a coffee shop. You guys live in the same neighborhood. He walked in, asked you to be a part of this show. I was curious as to what he said to you that made you go, yeah, I want to do this.
What it was really kind of the passion in his eyes and the kind of fire you felt about how much he wanted to play his character. Wow. And I've learned over time, that when somebody talented has a fire in them to do something, it generally turns out pretty interesting. Even if it isn't successful or something, it'll definitely be a journey worth taking. And I've been watching these Marvel movies for years now and wondering what it would be like to be in them. And I realized that Oscar and I have the same kind of vocabulary about movies and acting, and I knew we would be good partners. I just sensed it. So I thought, if I'm ever going to do this, if I'm ever going to jump into this sandbox, now's the time. This is the moment to do it. So I felt kind of clear right off the bat.
Isn't it cool when the stars align like that? It's so cool. What do you remember about that day? Like, do you remember what he was wearing?
Well, the thing about the pandemic is everybody's got a mask on. And I remember how hard it was to have the conversation in a mask. And I remember my daughter was there and she's really cool and really smart. And I walked away from the conversation with Oscar with her. And I was like, what do you think about that? And she was like, you should do that. And so, you remember the strangest details. I remember being cold and wishing I didn't have a mask on.
Yeah, it is exciting when you're around someone that's just so excited to work and like as much as you want to. So you meet, you do the show, you've now done the show, the world's about to see it. What was it like working with Oscar then? Was it everything you thought? Were you great partners? And what do you love about him as an actor?
Well, there's a lot of questions in one. I think that definitely carried a giant workload. I mean, he's playing multiple characters inside one person. We had to jump off really without a finished script with the whole thing. So we would work all week. Then we'd meet for brunch every Sunday to go over the up and coming work and read through the whole scripts to try to keep making sure we were all on the same page, making the same show, because the show's confusing because you have a hero who has a multiple personality disorder. So you're seeing it from multiple points of view. And it was difficult to track and figure out, wait, okay, so that's his point of view, but what's reality? And so coming up with May's character and how that can all integrate well and giving the director's confidence. And it was a tremendous amount of work. Plus he had to learn all these fight scenes and work on different accents and different voices and different body postures for the characters. So it was a big jump off the high dive, I mean, he was really taking a dare doing this, and he just showed up every day and he never gave himself permission to fail, no matter what went wrong or whatever. It was, well, how are we going to succeed despite that, Yeah. And I like people like that.
It was a massive workload. He plays several personas. For your character and for you personally, Ethan, which one did you like playing off of the most?
The one I like the most is the one I have to keep the most secret.
Oh, come on. Can you tell me a little bit about it without saying it?
Yeah. What was fun for me, as a student of acting and a lover of it and stuff, is to watch how hard it was for him at the beginning and how easy it was for him at the end. You know, he really got so comfortable and so fluent in the vocabulary of these characters, and he could go from one voice to the other voice and back again in the course of a scene. And at first he couldn't have dreamed of doing such a thing. And for me, when you have, normally the villain is the one who's insane, right? That's usually he escaped from a mental institution. Right. We have a hero who's suffering from mental illness. So I had to play a different position than you normally have to as a villain. You know what I mean? I had to try to balance the show out. So I had to come up with somebody who was both malevolent, but incredibly sane, and even to try to give the show ballast. You know, you can't have the Joker come in and appear when your hero's mouth. I mean, it was just like, it'd just be cake on cake, you know? So I don't know. I love science fiction and I love good storytelling. And so the joy for me was trying to help make this dynamic story make sense and be entertaining.
Yeah. Well, you were so brave in your subtlety, because you're right. That is like a fine line to be a villain, but also be the sane one. Like, you don't think about that, but the way you just said it, I was reading that you pulled from Carl Jung and David Koresh, and I was wondering what you pulled from each of those things to bring into your take on Arthur Harrow.
Well, I started as Oscar talked more and more about DID, which is dissociative identity disorder, which is what his character is suffering from. The more he was talking about how dreams are a big part of it, and symbols are a big part of how they create their personalities. And I thought the best counterpoint to a patient would be a doctor. You know, like what if it felt more like the villain was like a doctor? So I started thinking about Carl Jung. And then I also felt like, well, we're dealing with all this mythology, and you should also be kind of a priest doctor. So like the Dalai Lama meets Carl Jung gone bad, you know? So I just put all those ideas in a blender. And so I wanted him to look like a monk and sound like a doctor, you know, always, you know, because my character is trying to rid the world of pain. Well, isn't that what doctors do, right?
Yeah.
Just the trouble is, if you don't have any pain, it means you're not alive. To live is to hurt, right? So I don't know, but those are where the inspirations came from.
Summon the suit.
Summon the suit? What are you saying?
The suit.
The suit?
And keep this safe.
So be it.
Let's go, let's go.
May, congratulations on Moon Knight. What a wild ride, man, to go from like a comedy drama like Rami to like this massive MCU, Oscar Isaac, Ethan Hawke. Like, tell me everything. Like, what was that like, going from that to that?
I was not prepared. Like, I didn't know what I was getting myself into. I was just like, yeah, I'll do it. I'm ready. And then when I got there, I was so intimidated. Just working with, like, I grew up loving Ethan in so many movies, and I had to act cool about it, right? But slowly I was like, okay, these guys, I mean, and because I was intimidated, I saw how I didn't really know. I was a bit awkward. I'm really good at being awkward. But then after a while, I realized the more vulnerable I can be in sharing where I felt stuck or where something was new, the more I allowed them to help me. And they really empowered me wherever. And Oscar like taught me so much. I would watch him. I'd be like, how do you do green screen? And I just like watch how he did it. And I feel like I moved through this, like the work like that by just kind of studying him and seeing how free and how he just commits. And it's like, even if you throw out a bad idea, or even if what you do isn't good, there's no shame in going all out, like for them. You know, whereas I'm like, oh, I don't want to commit and go all out to hear like, May, that was like a lot. Don't do that, you know? But I realized that's where the magic is, where you just throw yourself in. And if they're like, okay, like reel it in or try this, or, oh, you inspired us for something else, that's the collaboration. And yeah, I'd say like more than anything, this was a learning process for me, which was so fun.
Wow. Well, you are fantastic in it. And I mean, yes, like it is so vulnerable, right? To just go all out. And it's funny. Why is it so scary for all of us as humans to just like try things? It's so silly. What did you learn? Because you mentioned you learned a lot from Oscar, and it feels like, you know, it was like a student sort of teacher relationship in a way. What did you learn from him just by watching him? And then did he say anything to you? Because you said that they empowered you in a lot of ways. Is there something that he said to you that stuck with you?
I feel like him and Ethan were able to see that it wasn't always easy, especially in the beginning. We had like these development days where we'd spend 6 hours on the weekend, whenever we found a day where we weren't all filming, just to kind of go over an episode. And they could tell, I think, that it was a little hard for me to use my voice about certain topics, like how I felt I was in a room full of men, I had Mohamed Diab's wife there, but yeah, there was a part of me that was like, I just don't want to mess up. I'm just going to like be right here, but they'd like pull out my opinion. And if something didn't feel right, they'd give me that space to really explain, and they'd really want to work with it. I never got brushed over, which I appreciate, because it could have gone the other way. And I definitely had moments on set where I just turn to Oscar and be like, I don't know how to do this moment right now. Like it's weird. The circumstance is weird. I come from a show where things are just hyper real and realistic and natural to this. And he would help ground it for me and talk me through the moment. And that was great direction. And so I always thank him. I'm like, you're playing like the most intense role, and you still manage to find time to be generous.
Well, May, good for you, though. I mean, you are spectacular in this. It's so fun watching you in it. And it's fun watching you and Oscar in the same scenes together. Was that, because obviously he plays, different personas. Was that really confusing? And did you have a favorite persona that you'd like to play, that you liked playing off of with Oscar?
Yeah, the circumstance was confusing because I'm like, I just don't know what it's like to be in this situation, right? But it was uncomfortable, and that discomfort is what I brought to it. I definitely preferred Steven. Well, Oscar was so good at like moving forth between the two, that I just, without any intellectualization of it, would feel who he was. And I was like naturally more nurturing with Steven, and it was like fun and silly. And then with Oscar, I'm like, what mood is with Mark, I'm like, what mood is he in? He's like more of an emo, like in his feelings kind of person. But Oscar generally was very light throughout the whole thing. And I love to be goofy and play in between takes. And he was just like always up for that.
Was there a scene that was just so memorable for you to shoot in this? I'm curious, because it feels like you garnered a lot of memory shooting this. Is there one particular that maybe was just super sentimental or really funny?
I mean, in the second episode, when we were filming, and like, I'm like, oh, you do hieroglyphics, and like he's like pointing at something. I think I was like funeral rites, and I was trying to act like I knew what it was, but it was like he would point specifically at the burial icon, which is like, obviously it's funeral rites. Like he would just like mess with me. And so we'd always like, I was like, stop, I don't want to laugh. Like I'm the kind of person, and it happens on Rami too. Like once I break,
you just can't stop.
I'm done. And like everyone around me starts just shaking, and I'm like, I'm so sorry, guys. Like I'm gonna get fired. But there were a lot of those moments where it was just kind of like cracking and breaking. And then there were obviously like any kind of fight was so memorable for me, because I was like, I never would have seen myself doing this. And now I love action. And yeah, it felt
you
really
killed it. It sounds like it was a blast. You killed it in those action scenes. What was it like training for those?
The first week, I was so sore that I cried. And I was just like, I don't know that they cast the right person, because I don't know if my body can take this. And then the week after that, I was fine. But it was this French stunt team, and they were incredible. I loved them. And working with them every day was so much fun that I woke up excited, and I was like, what a dream to wake up every day excited to do this. And they just had different things for me, different obstacles. They're like, today you're going to learn how to use a gun, and today you're going to learn to kick, and today this. And It was just a dream. I really think a big part of what makes it great is the people you work with, and they were all just like pure good people.
That's so cool. Well, maybe you'll use those skills with Doctor Strange, maybe, because I heard that you love Doctor Strange.
Ooh, I really love the mystical side of things. So I'm like,
Yeah, what do you love about that character, and what would you want your character to interact with him?
I just love how we saw how and what he had to go through to kind of learn, and it wasn't easy for him to get to where he was. And then he's not, I mean, none of them are without their flaws, but I'm all about transformation, and I loved his transformation. And just like the powers are cool, and they feel kind of infinite in this way where it moves between dimensions, and I'm always interested in that.
I think I'm losing it.
Real catch you are. You're bloody useless, Stevie.
Steven.
Congratulations on Moon Knight. Like what an incredible project to be a part of. I read that you said that when people see this, they're not going to recognize that it's you directing this. And so I wanted to know why. Like, what did you do on Moon Knight that was different from your other work that stands apart from all the other things you've done?
Ironically, I'm going to tell you something that feels the opposite, but it's not. I
Okay.
actually feel like Moon Knight is an extension of my small independent films, because at the core of it, if you strip down all the action and everything, it's a story, it's an intimate story about someone learning how to live with himself. And I cannot make a film or a show about something that I can't identify with. And I see myself like talking to you, being that nice guy. That's my mask, that's my persona. And there's something else inside of me, and all my journey through life, trying to make those people, the two sides of me being one, is the journey that every one of us go through. And that's why I identify with the Moon Knight. But when I said people are not going to recognize me because they're not going to be able to believe that I actually direct action in this way, and direct horror and direct comedy, which I'm not known for at all. And but at the same time, I was given the chance to bring my movies. This is why it's darker. This is why it tastes differently. And this is why people say if you cut the Marvel logo, people are going to feel like this is a different show.
And you're absolutely right. And you killed it. And you were like the perfect person for the job, because it is that, right? It's about Stephen and Mark reconciling with their past, present, and future. And us doing that too, like knowing we're not our past, but having to constantly like live with it and remind ourselves of it. It's incredible. I read that you made a 200-page pitch for this. What all goes into that? What was in there? Did a lot of it make it into the show? Tell me about this 200-page Moon Knight pitch.
Well, I moved here 3 years ago, me and my wife, starting from scratch. We're big in Egypt, but we always had this dream that we can share our stories on a bigger scale. So we had a couple of projects, but we never connected to anything except maybe the Moon Knight is the first pitch I've ever done in my life.
Wow.
The two of us. So we, for 2 weeks after reading the script, we put together this pitch. And by the way, it's all pictures. So you go through it just like that. It's not like an essay that you have to spend days reading it, but it covered everything. The locations, the editing, the tone, the action, how we're going to shoot it, the music that you liked wasn't the pitch 2 years ago. And the score, the locations in Egypt, how are we gonna develop the characters? And once we were done, we told ourselves, I told Sarah, if we didn't get this job, something is wrong with the world. Not because we covered everything. It's not about covering everything. It's about covering everything in a unique and a unique voice. When you know that you're the best guy to tell that story, you're gonna get the job.
Wow.
And by the way, that pitch became the Bible when we hired Aaron and Justin. That's what I handed them. And that's why their episodes feel like mine. They're 2 episodes. And today, that is the show.
Wow. Wow.
And I have to thank Marvel for hiring me for that pitch, and then letting me actualize that pitch.
Right, because it's one thing to pitch it and then have people come in and scrap things away, but for that to be the Bible and the source, Where do you keep it? I want to meet Sarah. I feel like she's a perfect example behind every great man.
I want to tell
There's
you,
an unbelievable woman.
I always feel guilty being interviewed without her.
I know. Next time I interview you, we'll make sure Sarah's there.
She's directing her first film. I'm pushing her as much as I can. She deserves it.
That's incredible. Where do you guys keep this pitch? And what was the first thing you did to celebrate when you got Moon Knight?
Smart and I wanted to tell that story. I was on the beach with her and the kids, and we got that call. It was a month after the final pitch with Kevin Feige, and my heart was pounding. I'm getting up. Marvel is calling me. Grant is calling me, and he told me, you got it. We started dancing, my kids, and on the beach. I'm not that kind of a crazy guy, so we were dancing, and people didn't know what we were doing, and we were embracing each other. But just imagining anyone in the US here getting a job like this would dance. But just imagining someone from a small town in Egypt learning his English from American movies.
Wow.
This is huge. And feeling the burden or the weight and the responsibility and the honor of being the first Egyptian to tell our stories to the world. I'm proud and honored and lucky.
And guess what? It's only the beginning, which is probably the best part of all this. Super excited. I love that visual of you guys dancing. You directed the first episode, and the first episode really sets the tone for the entire series. So what elements were really important for you to be in that first episode because it was setting the tone?
The first time I talked with Oscar Isaac, he saw my two movies, Clash and Amira, and he was reluctant because he just came out from big movies, Dune and Star Wars and X-Men, and he just wanted to make intimate films. And he told me, Mohamed, what the hell are you doing here? And I told him, Oscar, I don't think making small movies is just for making intimate stories is just for small movies. You can do intimate stories in big budget movies. And that's when we both started. I pitched him how I see the show, and we started working on making this a character study. So it was very important for me to know who Steven is, to know him as a real person. My favorite scene, and it's a scene that me and Sarah wrote and we fought for it, is the diner scene. That's the moment that you love Steven. That's the moment that you realize, okay, DID. Every time I hear about someone who has DID, I think, okay, he has those blackouts or whatever, and then he goes back to life. But no, Steven can't have a date, can't have a normal life. Everything is hard in his life. That stake moment is the moment that really, it's my favorite scene in episode 1.
It is so good. And it's because it's so human. And you're right. Like, we can have these intimate, incredible stories told like through these big epic scope ways. And you're such a master at that, which is why, you were on this project. That is one of my favorite scenes. Another one of my favorite scenes is the truck backwards scene. What was it like shooting that for Oscar and Steven? And I have a random question for you. Have you seen Licorice Pizza?
Not yet.
Okay, there's a scene where Alana Hayam is driving a truck backward. And I was wondering if you had seen that.
No.
But tell me about shooting that.
Well, shooting that was an interesting thing because I'm usually like, any scene is shot like in a day or half a day or like hours. And that scene took like a week, more than a week, between shooting on location in Slovenia and then shooting on stage. It was such an interesting scene. It was one of the first times that I learned to use previs. I'm one of the directors who need the location to understand how I'm going to shoot it. In 3 minutes after seeing the location and the actors doing it once, I know how to shoot it. But you can't do that with big action sequences. So I had to discover that in the previs. And that scene was created, and I knew that it's going to be different. Well, in a show, you're not competing with big budget, the biggest action sequences. So we created our own unique thing, the idea of a blink. The idea that this action sequence is not the Fast and the Furious. It has to have a different tone. And have you heard the song on the?
I was just going to say, Sarah picked the best song over it.
Honestly, except I give everyone their credit. That's my editor. Sarah picked all the other songs in the show, every single one of them, except that one. That was my great Cedric, the great editor. A perfect song. And it just like tells you the tone. Don't take us seriously. and don't take the narrator seriously. So I love that scene so much, and it's one of my favorite scenes because again, it's a small action sequence, but it's not. It's unique. And the blinks, I don't think anyone saw something like that. The idea of by the way, when I see a movie and I'm not that attached to the characters, if it's an action movie, sometimes I go to the bathroom and come back in the middle of the action sequences because who cares? But in what we really, the fresh thing, every time I told my team, the fresh thing about our action sequences were the blackouts. You never saw that. You're on your seat because you don't know if this action sequence is going to continue or I'm going to find myself in a different place, did something weird. That's partially why I love Steven, because seeing the whole show through Steven and Mark, getting the feeling of someone who has DID is something very important.
I can't tell the difference between life and dreams.
Thank you.
Lost the contact lens.
Hope you find it.
Thanks.
Hello. Hi, Justin and Aaron. How are you guys? Long day, huh?
Oh, it's fine. Doing great. How are you?
I'm swell, actually. I'm spectacular. It's beautiful outside. I get to talk to you guys about this like revolutionary, I want to use, show that blends so many genres so flawlessly and effortlessly. Thanks in part to you guys. And I know, you're used to making sci-fi horror films. So I was wondering what elements of, Justin and Aaron do you think people are going to find in Moon Knight?
It was pretty mind-blowing to us when we first saw the scripts to the episodes that we did and how similar they were in tone to our work as feature film directors. It's funny, when we're making something that ultimately gets categorized as again, like you said, sci-fi horror, we wear that with a badge of honor, but we also will fully acknowledge that the rhythm of the humor comes from Almost Famous by Cameron Crowe. It's not, we've always been bouncing into other genres wherever it felt appropriate, to the extent that outside of a marketing label, our movies probably shouldn't even have a genre placed on them technically. We're breaking so many rules of the genre usually. And there was something about tackling a character that if we didn't do that, you felt like the character from the comic book was going to confront you on it. like they would literally be offended at what you've done if you stayed within the confines of one particular genre.
Are you guys seeing Moon Knight in your nightmares? Is Khonshu showing up?
Well, they're not nightmares. They're lovely dreams.
Lovely dreams.
That's true. I don't know. Wow. That was like poor wording on my part. Absolutely. Speaking of Khonshu though, like what a cool character. I wanted to talk to you guys about him and sort of what did you envision for him and his seemingly strange relationship with Mark?
Yeah, well, I think what we really tried to do with Khonshu after going to the comics and trying to establish exactly what he is to Moon Knight, and we're going to say Moon Knight as all of the personalities that are being represented. Khonshu, we wanted to actually find just a real life allegory for that sort of a relationship. For example, like we find there to be a fraternal relationship between like Mark and Steven. Khonshu has, in some ways a paternal relationship, but also he's abusive and he's mean and petty and small. And so we wanted to try to think about, experiences that we've all had in our own lives. And this wasn't just the two of us, this was all of the collaborators on it. We'd look into our own lives and see if there was somebody that could kind of be a stand-in for Khonshu so that he would not just be kind of a one-note joke or, just an oppressive top-down figure, but he's actually strangely got his own humanity. You feel bad for him at certain points, which is weird to feel for, a CGI dead bird,
I love how weird this show is and it works. Like, I love how weird it is and how it works. It's so good. One of the there's a lot of scenes of obviously Mark and Steven talking to each other. And I was curious to ask the both of you what it was like directing Oscar during those scenes and what that was like and what conversations you guys were having on set.
Something we always say about Oscar is not only is he one of our generation's best actors, but he's also one of our greatest collaborators. And he's going to show up with everything figured out. He's a perfectionist. He is going to go between playing these different characters with a fluidity that is awe-inspiring. And he does it in such a way that's always just so kind and so collaborative and always taking feedback so gracefully from us. And you know, we take pride in saying that, you know, we helped shape this in some way, but it almost feels weird saying it because so much of it is just Oscar.
Yeah.
Being a spectacular performer.
It's really great, honestly, just to watch a genius at the top of their game. And even on like day 75, you know, you're all tired, you're in it, you barely even know what day it is, you know, but this guy doesn't blink, you know? And so every single time that you work with him, it's like eating the best meal of your life. It's these culinary delights. And you can just kind of like keep on watching and learning all day, every day. And it's as exciting as you might imagine, being able to work with Oscar and Ethan and May.
You guys got me on the edge of my seat where I just like wish I could be there. When Stephen and Mark are talking to each other, how did you guys shoot those scenes? Was someone sort of off to the corner, like reading the other characters' lines?
You know, oftentimes Oscar had it so dialed in that he could just literally go between the different characters. So if we would just, you know, swung the camera over to a reflection, he could just switch like that, no problem. Did it from day one, never had a problem with it. And, you know, he's just that guy. And then on days where, you know, he needed someone to act against his double, his brother Mikey, who was a great actor in his own right, and was really fun just to have on set and get to know those guys and get to know their family.
Wow, that's cool. What was it like directing Mikey and Oscar then together?
Oh, you know what's funny though? I mean, they're brothers.
Yeah,
and we're not going to get in between that. They worked with each other. We directed Oscar. There were tiny little times where we'd say, "All right, Mikey, give him a little more heat," you know, or whatever. But just you know, for the most part, honestly, that was their relationship, and it was actually really fun to listen in on the intercom as they were working out their little bits, because what it was Oscar working out how he was going to have to then give it later, you know. And that was really, by the way, surreal to watch. You know, somebody kind of trying to figure out how they're going to be in a few hours. So.
It sounds like an outer body experience, sort of like watching him do his thing. It's so cool you guys got to direct him, and you do have a lot of influence in this, by the way. In later episodes, there seems to be like a nod to Indiana Jones, and there's like this awesome sense of adventure. Did you guys draw inspiration from that franchise?
Yeah, you know, is interesting is that we'd be lying if we didn't say everyone wanted to do an Indiana Jones-esque adventure from the very beginning. Because, you know, you look at those movies and it's like, oh, what are they? 1 second, they're hilarious. The next second, there's these visceral thrills of being an adventurer. And in the next second, you can be terrified by something
that gives kids nightmares for generations.
Yeah.
Well, they're not nightmares.
Yeah.
Okay. I know it's funny though, but with Aaron and I specifically, it's like, oh, once we get that, we understand what the general vibe is. We'll tend to very intentionally not expose ourselves too much to that material that you're drawing from, so that you hopefully end up with something that's different and you don't unconsciously pay too much homage.
Yeah. I mean, if we're making Moon Knight, which is this character that has no strings attached to him and no shackles on him, you can do anything you want to it. It would be weird to then go and retread familiar ground. You know, it's kind of against the whole idea.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes sense. I also wanted to ask you guys about what it was like directing Oscar and Ethan Hawke together.
Yeah.
Because those scenes are so absorbing, I feel like, when the both of them are on screen. So what was that like?
I mean, with Ethan, in my case, I literally wouldn't be a filmmaker without Ethan Hawke, because I saw Before Sunrise and a couple other movies that he's done with Richard Linklater at my like formative filmmaking years, and I was like, that's what I want to do with my life. I want to make stuff like that. So me becoming a filmmaker was literally the result of seeing his past work. But then beyond all of that, he's written some beautiful novels. His last one in particular is just so wonderful. Something
Yeah.
that we're on set.
Read that in a single day. It was so good. Yeah.
He's
Wow.
one of our most accomplished just general filmmakers of our generation. If you watch Blaze that he wrote and directed, that movie is one of the greatest indie films of the last decade.
Mhm.
He's just a great all-around filmmaker, all-around artist, and to get to work with him in this capacity and to see how his mind works, to see how he brings humanity into especially a villain or something you traditionally call a villain. You learn so much from him, seeing him go through that process, and he's so open to you collaborating with him, and to see him and Oscar on screen at the same time. There's a few of those scenes we did that were probably our best experiences on this show.
Yeah. Yeah, he's such a good human being that I remember when we were first going to go meet him, we were both pretty intimidated. I know my own emotions. I was just like, man, I don't want him to decide I'm an idiot. You know, I just really want Ethan to, and he is just an incredibly open and vulnerable guy while also somehow being a guru level genius. That it feels like he's actually listening to and implementing your ideas immediately as soon as we met. And it's kind of a funny thing where it's like, who am I to give Ethan Hawke direction? And yet he absorbs it. You know, he's a sponge. He's a child with his eyes wide open at the same time as being one of the most accomplished actors of our time.
Hold the phone. Now hold the phone. Yeah.
Oh my God, you're alive. What's wrong with you, Mark?
Why did you call me Mark?
I feel so lucky to talk to you about what a special series, to be added to Marvel. And I read that you specifically said that you didn't want Moon Knight or this show to be connected to any other stories or characters in the MCU. And I was wondering, why is that?
Well, I mean, this story and this character definitely is in the MCU, but there's not a lot of contact points that we were beholden to tell Moon Knight's story. And I do think once you start diving into the Moon Knight comics, this is a character that got launched in 1975 in Werewolf by Night, and then kind of bounced around in various Marvel IPs for 5 years, and finally his own comic was launched in 1980. And so when you look at the years, and not just the years, the decades of storytelling and the rich storytelling and the complex storytelling, we realized we did not need any particular connectivity in the other narratives that the MCU was flowing in and out of. This story was Moon Knight's story, as a standalone. And that's definitely the way we approached it. It was never a conscious decision. It was just like, what's the best story that emerges from the pages of the comic that can be transferred to the screen? And that's really where this MCU offering emerged from, is a character story. Mark Spector, his complex personality disorder. He's obviously dealing with dissociative identity disorder. And just what's that best story that we can tell? And how does that eventually merge into the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
I love where that mindset is too. Like, let's just tell the best story, because we live in a world now, right, where everything is so connected. So it was so fun diving into this world. Of course, I've only seen a couple episodes, but it is spectacular. Now, I want to ask you on the other side of the coin. I'm a little bit of a hypocrite. Now that you have established Moon Knight's world, would you want to see him interact with other characters? Like, what would a season 2 look like?
Well, as you know from seeing some of the episodes as you have, tonally, we're painting on a lot of different canvases here. We have a globe-trotting action adventure. We have a very intense character study. We have the humor that you get with the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Also, on the Moon Knight pages, things go bump in the night. There's certain spookier aspects of Moon Knight comic that does transition onto the screen. So I think you have so many different aspects tonally of Moon Knight. Where this character merges into the MCU is anybody's guess. I mean, it's obviously, as you can imagine, Kevin Feige's ultimate decision. But because this is such a rich tapestry that was woven together for this series, I think where he goes in the future, he could land anywhere.
Wow, what a line. Rich tapestry. I love that. And you guys blend these genres so seamlessly because it all works. And watching it, you're like, how does this all work? You mentioned Kevin Grant. What was it like meeting with, Oz? What was his vision for this show? And tell me about your conversations with Kevin about Moon Knight.
Well, I mean, Kevin and I go back to 2000, 2001, 2002, Spider-Man 1. So that's how long Kevin and I go back. But then
Wild.
obviously Kevin has gone on to launch this amazing Marvel Cinematic Universe. But it was working closely with Kevin within the confines of Marvel Studios now that truly amazed me and invigorated me daily. I remember a conversation that we had very early on in the development process. We bumped into each other in the kitchen and he said, how's it going? And, you know, Jeremy Slater and the writers team, we'd been going for a while then, and we made a lot of progress, but we hadn't cracked it per se yet. And Kevin said, you know, let me tell you a story about when I was a kid. I was in Brooklyn and my parents put me on a train into Manhattan. And I remember standing in line vividly, a line that was wrapped around the block to get into the Egyptian art exhibit that was traveling through the country. And he said, I remember the excitement that I had both waiting in line and then also seeing these great, these great paintings and all this art and architecture that continues to invigorate and mesmerize us today. He said, if we can capture the feeling I had being a kid on that day, and if we can infuse that feeling into this show, we've got a series. And so from that day on, we really took his direction and made this much more of an Egyptology-centric, Indiana Jones style globetrotting action adventure. And that's what makes the show that the audience is going to see on March 30th. That's pure Kevin Feige. That's Jeremy Slater, our head writer in our hardworking writers room. And then obviously our great directors, Mohamed Diab and Benson and Moorhead. And then rounding out, obviously, is our amazing cast of Ethan, Oscar, and May.
I feel like they should all just walk out right now. We should
Yes.
stop because that anecdote is so cool in the kitchen. I have so many questions. Like first is like, what hat was Kevin wearing? Did he have a Moon Knight merch this early on? Like that's where my mind went.
You do know you've made it at Marvel when you show up at a meeting and Kevin's wearing the Moon Knight cap. It's like, yes.
Yes, I'm here. I have made it.
We've got a show.
Yeah, I'm so happy for you. I think you did evoke that feeling, and what a cool like tone and direction to get it. It is very Night at the Museum, but like we said earlier, there's so many different genres. The show is very deep, right? I read that you said that it's also about Moon Knight reconciling with. This show is really about reconciling with your past, present, and future.
Yes.
And so I was wondering how you think the different personas like Steven and Mark challenge each other to do that.
Well, I think, I don't want to speak for all of us, but I think we all have part of our past and presence that we have to atone for. And that's really what we as an audience watch in real time with Stephen Grant and Mark Spector as they're trying to work out the aspects of their personalities and their particular universe. Who am I in this universe? Where am I going from here? What's my future look like? How do I atone for my past sins? How do I deal with this new dynamic that I'm possibly a superhero and that I'm possibly, obviously, also an avatar of this crazy Egyptian god Khonshu? And so really, it's just, I think that's what makes the Moon Knight series special. It always keeps the audience guessing as to where this character or these characters is going to go next. And that's where I think the amazing aspect of bringing Oscar Isaac to the table and an actor absolutely working at the top of his craft, because this is a very difficult characters to embody, I should say properly. And he does it seamlessly. And that was amazing.
It really is unbelievable to see like literally seconds apart, the range of emotions that he like brings to all these characters, like you were saying. And even appearance wise is exciting for Marvel fans. Let's talk about like the design of Moon Knight and the costumes and Khonshu and like what all went into that and what conversations are you guys having crafting this? Because this is the first time a live action Moon Knight has been brought to life.
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, we started in the pages, where it always starts. And there's been some amazing Moon Knight and Mr. Knight designs drawn over the years. And that was really our foundation. And our costume designer, Megan, was absolutely amazing with coming up with different concepts. And, Ryan and the incredible concept team at Marvel, turning out different options and opportunities that we had to explore with this character whose costume has changed over the years. But it was really, using that North Star, that's the great line in the comic, I wear white because I want the bad guys to see me coming. So we always knew that we had a character that was going to have a white costume and then what we could play with within that. And, it was one of the things, Oscar, a big fan of the IP, a big fan of Moon Knight. And when he came aboard, he just kept on challenging us. How can we make this different? How can we make this unique? Hey, I was doing my research last night. I saw this thing. How can we infuse the costume with this aspect that I saw on the page? So it was really just dealing with a bunch of different artists and craftsmen and women that really came together to bring this amazing costume and costumes to the screen.
Was there a specific piece of artwork that like sticks out to you that was like a big point of inspo or a comic specifically?
It was obviously a variety. And I think to the viewer who's also the comic book fan, when you look at the costume that we present on screen, I think you're gonna see a little bit of a blend of the last, from 1975 on, different aspects of those different aspects of that costume infused into what we're bringing to the screen. And I think they're gonna like it. It's a very cool costume.
Obviously, the show tackles mental health issues. Thank you for sharing all that about the costume. Did you guys have a professional on hand to sort of consult on those things?
Yeah, for Moon Knight, we worked with a variety of consultants, an Egyptologist, but another one of the consultants that we worked with was a mental health professional, Dr. Puri. And as we were building this character out, the writer's room was open to Dr. Puri and vice versa. He read all of our scripts. And obviously, we're dealing with a unique situation. We're dealing with a superhero. So we're dealing with that canvas. We're also dealing with a fictional character that has a supernatural bent to it. But what we strove for from day one, as you can imagine, was being respectful and reverential to the mental health issue that our character is dealing with. And we think through a variety of consultants' help, we were able to present a fictionalized version of that the audience will start seeing soon.
And start loving soon. Thank you so much for talking to me. I am obsessed with the music on this show. I want to know all about the info. I don't know if you have 2 seconds to just tell me a little bit of it, because the music selections were just fire.
Well, the music is bananas cool. I mean, it's awesome.
It's the coolest.
It's on my, believe me, it's on my phone and it plays nonstop. But what I do have to really call out, when Mohamed Diab, the great Egyptian filmmaker, came aboard, what we didn't know right away, but became apparent very quickly, is how many people want to work with this director. And so if you do look at our credits, Hashem is our composer. He's an Egyptian composer that would not have come to the table through any other avenues except with Mohamed Diab saying, this guy is dope. He's at the top of his game in Egypt. We got to give him a listen. We did. He blew us away. Same thing with one of the editors, Ahmed. He edited episodes 3 and 4. He's a gentleman and an editor who has worked with Mohamed in the past. Probably wouldn't have been on our radar any other way unless we strove for authenticity at all aspects. And it's another one of the things that when you bring Mohamed Diab to this table, you're going to bring a story that people haven't seen before, told by people you probably haven't seen before either. So that was exciting.